I didn't know what I'd find when I traveled forward, only that I wasn't ready for how it would change me. When I arrived, I knew immediately this wasn't my time, not because of what stood in front of me, but because nothing felt eager to begin. The streets were wide and quiet, softened by growth left alone for years. Light lingered longer than I expected, stretching as the hours passed. Even standing still, part of me felt late. As more time passed, I expected the future to announce itself, motion layered over noise, noise layered over intention. Instead, even the wind moved slowly between the buildings. Part of me didn't trust the quiet. It felt like something I'd eventually have to pay for. Over time, buildings still stood tall, but vines traced their edges patiently. Stone and glass carried the marks of repeating seasons. Nothing here seemed desperate to outlast time. I waited for something to start, an alarm, a signal, a demand, but the day didn't begin, it simply continued. At night, darkness arrived early and without apology. Light existed, but only where it was needed. This world didn't seem afraid of the quiet. Days slowly passed without being counted. Shadows crossed the same walls again and again and again. I moved through spaces once built for crowds, now open and unclaimed. I kept expecting to be corrected, redirected, evaluated, but nothing asked me to explain myself. The air cooled and then warmed, like the weather was keeping its own memory. The city rested when it could. I wasn't used to that kind of permission. At first, I measured each day by what I finished. It's what I was used to. But then I realized no one here was measuring me back, and that unsettled me more than I expected. Weeks left quiet evidence, thicker leaves, softer paths, familiar rhythms. I noticed signs of life before I noticed people. Presence revealed itself slowly. Gardens appeared where roads once cut straight lines. Nothing was fenced, only respected. Boundaries felt shared instead of enforced. I stopped searching for proof that this was the future. I wasn't interested in being convincing. One morning, I realized I hadn't checked for a way back in a while. Not because I forgot, but because I no longer felt behind. I met people gradually, as if the world was pacing the introductions. Small groups, steady movements, familiar rhythms. No one treated my presence as remarkable. They didn't ask where I came from right away. I wasn't a story to consume. I was simply there. Conversation moved slowly, but never awkwardly. Silence wasn't avoided, it was included. I felt my old urge to fill it, but I let it pass. I noticed how little people carried. Tools, bags, tension. Their shoulders rested lower than mine ever had. I caught myself forgetting how fast I used to move, and for a moment, that scared me. Work followed daylight, weather, and need, but not clocks. Tasks ended when they were complete. I stopped racing towards an invisible finish line. No one there knew who I used to be, and for the first time in my life, that felt like relief. Seasons turned quietly, sharper mornings, longer shadows, heavier clothes. My body adapted without resistance, and time stopped feeling like it was something I was losing. For a moment, I wondered what would happen if I stayed too long, not because I was afraid, but because leaving was starting to feel optional. Sometimes we walked without speaking at all, not because words were missing, but because nothing needed to be performed. And that's when I realized I wasn't observing anymore, I was participating. And the part of me that always felt late had finally arrived. Days stacked gently, cool mornings, warm afternoons, evenings that didn't rush away. I stopped counting them, and in turn, I noticed who I was becoming inside of them. The world felt smaller here, but fuller, like it chose depth over scale. People still gathered, but never tightly. Space was always left open, as if room itself were a form of care. I learned from them to stop pushing myself forward so quickly. No one here hurried ahead of themselves. There was trust that tomorrow would arrive. Slowly, my body began believing that too. You see, back home, I measured life by momentum. But here, momentum felt optional, useful, but not required. And I finally understood how tired I'd been. I wondered what had been set down to reach this balance, what pressures were refused, what arguments ended quietly. Not all at once, but over time. No one spoke about the past like something broken. It was simply finished. And that taught me restraint with my own thoughts. When I finally realized it was time to leave, there was no announcement. I knew I could stay, and I knew that if I did, I might never want to return. Goodbyes weren't speeches, they were smaller. A shared walk, a longer pause, a look that said enough. And before I knew it, the moment had arrived. As I stepped away, the world didn't react. It didn't need to remember me to remain real, and that humility stayed with me. You see, this future wasn't waiting to be found. It wasn't asking to be feared, fixed, or explained. It was simply living, quietly, on purpose. When I finally returned to my own time, everything felt louder, everything felt faster. But now, I knew silence was possible, and I could finally hear what I've been using noise to avoid. Thanks for walking through the future with me. Looking ahead always makes me think about how small our place in time really is. To really understand that, I went back millions of years. Welcome to the age of the dinosaurs.